When we were starting out in 2017, we were working in like a 100 square foot room where 20 children were sitting on top of each other.
You once mentioned that you don't do this work for free.
When we enroll a child, right, what's unique about our enrollment process is that we don't look at the educational qualification of that child. What we look at is how committed the parent is.
What are some of the misconceptions that you've seen people come in with?
I have had people not willing to humanize my children. They don't even understand the concept of my child being a human being. And she often shares, that had I not been in the program, I would probably be a house help somewhere. But that same child today has finished her teacher training program. She's earning in 1 month what her mom earns in 6 months.
Hi, I'm Prerna, an admissions coach and the founder of Prerna Bansal & Co. For over a decade, I've worked with hundreds of students and parents to help them get into the best colleges for their undergrad and masters. And now, I bring to you these stories from across the field of education, engaging with parents, students, educators, and trailblazers across the industry to bring you what you will find in no textbook. Welcome to Out of Syllabus, a podcast where we talk about the education stories that really matter but you won't find in any textbook.
It is my absolute pleasure to welcome you all to Yenoran's 7th Annual Day.
Hello and welcome to this episode with Vedika Agarwal of Yenoran, who is one of the people I respect the most in the education industry of India. And I don't say that lightly. We go a long way back, but I have seen Vedika's journey since 2017 when she set up Yenoran, a community impact NGO in Chennai, and has since transformed hundreds of lives. I have seen her manage the NGO and do a full-time master's at UCL, one of the best colleges in the world, and scale it to the amazing institution that it is today, with 2 schools, one primary school and a kindergarten school across Chennai, and 3 community centers that work with children and adults. Vedika, how do you do it all?
Thanks, Prerna. Thanks for that very generous introduction. And I too am thrilled that you've been a part of this journey of building Yenoran and supporting our children, especially through the careers program that you support us with. So thank you so much, and thank you for having me here today. How I do it all, I don't think that I do any of it, right? I think I'm simply an enabler. So I bring people together, such as yourself, into the communities of Chennai that then have all the experience, knowledge, and potential to help the children.
Amazing. So I have seen Yenoran from the early days where it was in a small room
Yeah.
in the Washam and Pet slum community.
Yeah.
And today to having 5 centers, how does it feel?
It's really big, right? Like you said, when we were starting out in 2017, we were working in like a 100 square foot room in the community, right, where 20 children were sitting on top of each other, and then me and my friends were all volunteering and trying to support them on their academic and non-academic
And I think parents
learning
were
journey.
like not on board with this. A lot of
Yeah.
parents were like
Yeah.
very confused
Yeah,
and
about
worried.
what about
Who
what-
are these girls that have just come in?
Yeah, so there was definitely that resistance, right? Because we were also doing a lot of non-academic interventions with the children. So it wasn't like a conventional tuition center, right? Where
Which is
they
very
came.
new for these communities, right?
Absolutely.
Like after school
Yeah.
activities, art, play,
Theater,
hobbies.
dance,
Yeah,
absolutely. So there was a lot of confusion about what we were doing and what our intentions were, right? But now we're entering our 9th year, and like you were saying, that we have grown from that one room to multiple campuses that span thousands of square feet, and I think that's just testament to what we set out to achieve, right, and how we've done that, like especially the focus on non-academic learning, and of course the academic results also that we've been able to enable our children to achieve. it is all of that faith and trust that the community has eventually put in us that has helped us grow to this level, and work with many, many hundreds of children beyond my wildest imagination. Yeah.
So, as you were talking about scale, I remember a conversation we had many years ago where you spoke about this ambitious dream of educating children who don't have access as a lot of other children do.
Yeah.
And it's always kind of a conundrum, right? Between how do you impact many children at the same time, but how do you impact one life
Yeah.
at a time?
Yeah.
So, how did you make that decision?
Yeah. So even at Yenodan right now, we don't work with thousands of children on a daily basis, right? And that's a conscious decision that we've taken for the very reason that you've cited right now. We run a very high impact program, and we want to ensure that every child that gets enrolled at Yenodan has equal access to the quality of that program, for which of course we need people who believe into the program, right, who are willing to train within the program and then deliver it to these children. So while we're searching for those highly passionate, committed individuals, we don't wish to limit the quality of the program by scaling it to thousands of children. So that's how, we're very consciously growing. We're growing very slowly because we want every child to have like equal benefits from what Yenodan stands for and has to offer.
And I think it's absolutely amazing that while it may look slow to you, Vedika, this has been incredible growth to achieve in under 10 years.
Yeah.
So, like you said, people are an integral part of what you do
Yeah.
at Yenodan. So, can you just tell us a little bit more about how people form the community of, enablers at your centers, and how you actually support the community today?
Yeah. So we started this podcast with me talking about the people, right? And the role that everyone around me plays in impacting these children beyond me. And I think what's beautiful, the most beautiful part of this people piece is that 90% of our team, right, comes from the community.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So we are consciously building the organization to be representative of the not only the community's needs but the community's voice. And in doing so, I feel like we're adding great context to our work. Right?
Yeah.
We're truly understanding, we're listening, and we're understanding what children need, what families need, by having that representation in our team and designing program to meet those very specific needs. And in terms of bringing on other, people from the sphere, into our network of enablers, partners, donors. I think I've been very fortunate in having people in my life believe in what I'm trying to do.
Absolutely.
Right? Like this depth impact and this change in every single child's life, future, and family. I've been really blessed that when I talk about this vision with people, there is not a lot of resistance and a lot of buy-in and a lot of willingness to want to help and support. And I think it is all of that, love and empathy that people around me bring into Yenodan, into our children's lives, and into the communities we serve.
So I think yes, absolutely, because as having been part of that journey, I also attest to the fact that you have so much authenticity in what you do, and you so truly believe in your purpose and your vision that the person in front of you has no option but to buy in, and be part of that journey with you. So thank you for taking us along.
It was great.
Yeah, so another interesting perspective that you shared was about how the community has now become its own voice, and
Yeah.
is really standing up to represent what Yenodan means. So from a day where the parents didn't trust you and thought you were, randomly just experimenting on their children, to now today those same parents being your biggest cheerleaders. So how did that happen?
Yeah, I think consistently showing up, right? Come rain or sun, right? We were there for the children and for the community. And I think just that consistency was proof enough to the parents that we're here for the right reason.
You actually care.
And
You're
that we
not
actually
here-
care.
You're not here for like some God complex, savior complex.
Absolutely, right? Like,
Yeah.
people don't recognize me as the founder because I shy away from that savior complex so much, right? Because of the background I come from, I can be held accountable to that. And so I do my work very quietly and as behind the scenes as I possibly can until
very
people
tough,
like you
Vedika.
force me to be in front of the camera. Yeah, so
Because the work you're doing is so incredible. Yeah.
thank you. So it is that consistency and showing up and just doing our best for the children, right? Without wanting anything in return. I think
Yeah.
that builds the faith in the parents.
Yeah. What was also interesting to me, you once mentioned that you don't do this work for free in the community. And, you also ensure or enable the parent to take some accountability for their
Yes.
child's journey.
Yes.
So, can you tell us a little bit more about
Yeah.
that?
So when we enroll a child, right, what's unique about our enrollment process is that we don't look at the educational qualification of that child.
Okay.
Is that child reading at their learning level, doing math at their learning level? None of that. What we look at is how committed the parent is towards their child's learning journey. How invested is the parent in their child's growth, in their child's success. And based on that interview that we actually have with the parent, we enroll the child.
Right.
So right off the bat, our first engagement with any family that we work with is that we're here to give our 100% to your child if you meet us at least a 50%. And in the demographics we work with, that's a real struggle, right?
Yeah.
Parents carry their own baggage, their own difficulties of financial instability, right? Worrying about where the next meal is going to come from. So to, shock them with this requirement of we're
Showing
here if
up.
we're here if you're here, sometimes is met with a lot of resistance also,
Yeah.
right? Because it's never been an expectation that they've been held accountable to.
Because they didn't see that growing up, right?
Absolutely,
So
yeah.
for them to now show up in that way for their children, that's also like intergenerational trauma that they have to kind of combat
Absolutely.
in that journey,
Yeah.
right?
So that's how we hold parents accountable. So
yeah.
we hold parent teacher meetings twice, almost every alternate month, right? And we track the attendance of parents.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
a very interesting
So-
metric.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if a parent misses 2 meetings consecutively, we pull them up, right? And then they have to have a one-on-one with a senior leader at the organization. So there is very deep accountability that we're trying to build within the families, because we believe that that's the only sustainable way to carry forward our impact, right? Because
Yeah.
tomorrow, if we don't exist in the community, the child's home and family will still exist.
Yeah, and I think that's what's also very interesting about how you've been approaching, community rehabilitation in a way, because you want it to last beyond you. And I've seen that how you work with the community. And I also found it very interesting that you realized that somewhere along the line, it wasn't just about educating the child, but about educating the community. And educating the parent. So how did that come about? Was there a particular experience or a turning point where you said, wait, this is a missing link that we need
Yeah,
to
great
address?
question. So before I started Yenodan, I was teaching at a public school in Chennai. and I was straight out of college, so I was a little bit of a child myself, right? But when I was at the school, something I picked up on almost immediately was that the kids who were doing well in my class were the kids whose parents showed up to school almost every day or at least once a week and checked in with me, checked in with the headmistress, checked in with the child themselves on how they were doing. And I saw this repeat itself over the 2 years that I was teaching at this public school, right? And across the spectrum, whether it be the child's academic success, their mental health, their physical health, I kept noticing that the kids who were struggling had parents who were completely checked out, who had no idea of the child's whereabouts even, right?
I think that's also, just to jump in, it's also a very important metric for students and parents across the spectrum. It's not just about underprivileged communities. I think we also see that today in private schools, right? Where the involvement of the parent is a direct indicator of how the child performs and to their mental and physical well-being.
Yeah, and there's so much research that's been conducted on it. In fact, I did my master's thesis on this because I was
Fantastic.
so intrigued by this correlation, right? That parents play such an influencing factor on the child's learning and growth and development.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So then when you came back from your master's, was that, a point where you said that maybe now we start doing something for the parents and we start bringing them into the fold and ensuring they have better outcomes for themselves?
Yes, so not only after I finished my master's and did this research paper, but in fact, when I was a teacher itself at the beginning of my career, and I picked up on this correlation, is when I started doing a lot of outreach work within the community and tried to mobilize parents to be more invested in their child's lives. That eventually, of course, once I did my master's, it grew into a more formal program, right, where we were training the mothers in English because they had this willingness to try to engage with their child in English communication when the child came home. Right, so we launched a basic English program for some of the mothers who had shown that interest. A lot of our fathers, right, don't play a role in their child's life at all. And I really wanted to challenge that. We launched a program called My Appa Yen Hero, which means my dad, my hero, right? And what we did through that program is we created a 50-week calendar of activities that a father and child could engage with.
Wow.
Because when I spoke to the fathers, right, and I still am, like, I just show up at people's homes and start holding them accountable, right? Start conversing with them and start maybe sometimes even fighting with them. And in those conversations with fathers, I started hearing a lot of, but what do you want me to do with the child? I don't know what to do with the child. What do you mean talk to the child about what?
Again, because they've not seen that.
Yeah,
and
there has been no role
they
modeling.
They don't know how, exactly.
Yeah. So then I was like, okay, wait, what if I gave you activities, right? Like a simple, just conversation starter, a prompt for the week, like would that help? And it has. It's done, wonders for relationships and families, and how an entire family dynamic can change once the father's more involved and feels like they too are a part of the family, and not just
Absolutely.
a provider.
Yeah. I think in fact there's a lot of potential, in case you are not already doing it, to have this as a flashcard, game, and
Great
have
idea.
it. Yeah. And it could be a Yenoran,
that's actually a
income
great
stream.
idea.
Yeah. We should talk about this.
We should
later.
actually.
Because I think all families can use that kind of role modeling.
Yeah.
I think privilege and family dynamics are not necessarily interlinked. So a very interesting insight, and yeah, a lot to take away from that one. So coming back to the children at Yenodan, Vedika, one of your missions at Yenodan is education for all and ensuring that access is not prohibited by your bank balance, right? So what are some of the misconceptions that you've seen people come in with to the center when they come to interact with the children, especially if they're a first time donor or a first time volunteer and they're not very familiar with the work you do?
Yeah. How long do you have for me to answer this question?
I actually have one example of my own as well.
Do you want to share first?
I can actually. So I remember once I came into the center and I don't remember who the person was, but basically I think one of the easiest misconceptions, especially in the early years, the people had was the children at Yenodan don't know how to speak English. So they would come in and speak to them in their vernacular language, in Tamil, and kind of be a little condescending in the way that they would speak to the children.
Yeah.
And it would really give me such a thrill when the children responded in like perfectly fluent English, which could rival any private school child's language skills, and not to say that language or English is an indicator of your education, right? But unfortunately that's just how we as a society have been conditioned and colonized into thinking that this is what good education looks like. And I think that was like one of the first and the most straightforward ways in which the Yenodan children stood out and said that, hey, please don't talk down to me. So I think that's been one of my best observations.
Thank you for sharing that. So definitely, language is not a very apt indicator, but it's the most prominent indicator, right? Even when you go to conferences or you engage with people in the ed sector, there is a lot of impact associated with English language speaking and communication skills.
Like English literacy.
So that is something that we all kind of fall back on, right? Like I think not only with marginalized children, but even in our day-to-day interactions, if we meet someone who is not very fluent in English, we immediately judge the person, right, and where they come from. And I guess that's just human tendency. But you are still talking about a skill. I have had people come and engage with me at a Yenodan center, not willing to humanize my children.
Like they are just entities.
Yes, they don't even understand the concept of my child being a human being, of my child being someone's child, having
that's
parents.
How desensitized we've kind of become as a society to the experiences of people different from us.
Absolutely.
Right? And by us, I mean as a privileged sector.
Segment. Absolutely, right. So once, in fact, there was this potential donor who kept referring to my kids as these kind of children.
Oh my God.
Right? And I heard it a couple of times.
Mad.
And then the third time I was like, I'm sorry, what kind are you talking about? Because I was confused. I was like, they're children. Like, what kind? Like, they're
you
not
mean
a species.
Like amazing children? Like the Yenodan kind of amazing children? Yeah.
And she was like, you know what I mean? These kind. And I was like, I don't think even you know what you mean.
God, yeah.
So I think a large part of my work is to, sensitize people in my network on, the humaneness of our children and their community also.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then that kind of brings me to, how the journey of a Yenodan child actually now sets them up for a greater level of success in terms of their outcomes, right? So whether it's better grades, whether it's multitude of hobbies and extracurricular activities, competitions that the children may be entering, which are on par or, at least with good private schools. So now, when you see your children going for these kind of opportunities, and what kind of reactions do you get from the people outside of Yenoran?
Yeah. So everyone is usually like flabbergasted, right? Like, oh, these are not private school kids. Like, oh, they go to they come from a non-profit. So there's definitely that sense of shock before there is like admiration and then acceptance, right? But I mean, that's what education for all essentially means, at least to me, right?
Yeah.
That irrespective of where you come from and who you are, you get to excel in something you're good at. That may be academic or non-academic,
Yeah.
right? And that's basically what we do day in and day out for our children.
Yeah.
Help them learn about themselves, become self-aware to understand what they're passionate about, and then see how we can just be a catalyst in them becoming good at that passion.
And now that you've had a couple of Yenoran children graduate out of the program, right, and become adults, essentially in your cradle to college program, right? So, how do you see them now engaging back with the community, and what kind of tangible impact? Because I've seen some like exceptional examples. I would love for you to share that with us.
So, the first student who left Yenoran, he's joined the police force, right? Which is so big for us. And you, in fact, played an instrumental role in him getting into college and, figuring out where his life was taking him at a very vulnerable age, right? But I think all of that guidance, love, and support from these enablers I keep talking about led him to realize that he has the potential and the willingness to want to give back to his community, to do
You just
good for
need
it.
someone to believe in you. I think that's like the
Absolutely.
first step, because that's something as an emotional safety net a lot of these children don't grow up with, right? And
Beautifully
I think
said.
that's one of the again biggest takeaways that Yenoran gives its children.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So absolutely, right? That belief in self, because someone else believes in me. I think that really drives them to, give their life a real chance. So, our police official is one such example. We have another graduate who comes from a very, very difficult household, right? Like, it's one of those families where you really do wonder where the next meal is going to come from. And she often shares, that had I not been in the program, I would probably be a house help somewhere. I would have dropped out of school and, I would have been forced into working because I would need to eat, right? But that same child today has finished her teacher training program and she's placed in a CBSE school and she's earning a lot of money. She's earning in 1 month what her mom earns in 6 months.
That's incredible. Like I'm so thrilled to hear that. I think I might have an idea of who you're talking about. We'll catch up about that after this. But I'm so happy to hear that. And I think that's the impact of what education for all means, right? It's not just about teaching someone English or having them speak fluently, right? It's about improving their lives in a way that the generations that follow can benefit from this intervention, right? So I mean, amazing, Vedika. Like, the work that you're doing is not just changing a life, it's changing a family. And then hopefully their generations to come. I think we're both getting a little emotional as we speak. But coming back to what education for all looks like, what to you is an ideal scenario today in schools, in communities where access to education or education for all is simple and straightforward? What does that look like?
I think first and foremost awareness, right? When you work with a group of first generation learners like we do, more than working on the child's academic excellence or non-academic interests, we are spending our time building awareness in the community about what quality education could actually look like.
Yeah.
Right? Because these children go to schools where there is a lot of societal hierarchy at play, right? Parents are not treated like they should be. Children are definitely not treated as individuals
I think
with
there's-
identities.
Yeah, I think there's also a lot of like abuse, mental and physical
Yes,
abuse that happens
yes.
in schools that we don't know about.
Yes.
I became sensitized to that after I was working with Yanoran for a bit. So
Yeah. So, what we find the need to constantly do is go back to the community and tell them that this is not quality education. And you have the right to demand better for your child, and your child deserves better.
So is that where the Right to Education Act comes in, and how do you
Yes.
see that actually being implemented?
Yeah. So the Right to Education Act was framed with this very, ethos in mind, right? That how do we hold the system accountable to our children? So it has some amazing initiatives, listed under the act, but of course, when it comes to implementation,
Yeah,
it goes way beyond just the written policy.
yeah,
Right? And holding a system accountable at that scale may not always be viable.
yeah.
But yeah, on paper, there are some great benefits that our children and their families can avail. And that's where the awareness gap is, right? The hope is that if enough families know about the
Exactly,
benefits,
exactly.
they can demand to have access to them.
I think there's also sometimes a lot of gatekeeping, right?
Oh, yeah.
About not letting the people who should be accessing these benefits know that these benefits are available to them. You know? So that's definitely one such bottleneck. What else do you see as a bottleneck in helping children from all communities, have the same kind of education?
Agency, right? I feel like a lot of times children and parents feel like this is the best that they get and it's the best that they deserve,
Yeah.
right? And they don't have a voice or a say in what they're getting.
Yeah.
And I feel like that ownership and agency also needs to be built into these communities.
So empowering them really,
Absolutely.
and which is a lot of then education and re-education
Yeah.
and
Yeah. So that's where, for these very, these are like actual societal changes that need to happen, right? Which may take years, generations to happen. But I believe if we're consistent with our awareness outreach, and consistency being key, because it is human tendency to forget if you're told only once, right?
Yeah.
So consistently, if you're being made aware of your rights, you may have that safety net that you were talking about earlier, and that belief that I have agency and I have voice, and that I can go and make demands for my child to have that quality education that another fee-paying child may have access to.
and it obviously helps, right, to have a partner advocate in that process, which is I think also a lot of what Yanoran does. The team of volunteers is very, very hands-on. It's very rare to have that kind of support, and I think that's also where the Yanoran model is different from a lot of other interventions that non-profits do in this space. So having spoken about the last couple of years, what was that one moment where you felt like this is worth it? I'm sure you have many of those.
Yeah.
But on a hard day when it can get tough, what's a moment that you look back on and remind yourself to keep
Yeah. So because I'm so deeply involved in so many children's lives, right, I learned about this concept of micro joys, right? Because and what micro joys essentially means is like the joy in very small things, right? Like it's self-explanatory, the
Yeah.
term. But a mentor taught me this concept of finding micro joys, because we're playing a longitudinal game, right? We see outcomes of children changing their lives and thus their legacy and their family's generational future after decades of working with that child.
Yeah.
Right? And sometimes you lose hope, you lose sight of what you're working towards.
Yeah, I think coming back to the student we were talking about earlier, who's now police official.
Yeah.
There was a period in the middle when we were ghosted, and it can feel like what just happened. You know, we've spent so much of time and energy and invested ourselves into this process.
Yeah.
And I think also him being the first college student
Yeah,
for
yeah,
Yenoran, right?
yeah.
But then one day he comes to you in his police uniform.
Yeah, right.
And I think that's a
He
macro
walks
joy.
in, yeah. So to, like, that's why I keep telling my team also to find micro joys, because in this longitudinal game it's very easy to lose hope.
And to
right?
feel disillusioned.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Because for that teacher to emerge, for that police official to emerge, for that sports person to emerge, it's going to take us those 18 years of working with that child and their family. Having said that, of course, there are so many good days that I can go back to in my mind, good moments. I think what's closest to my heart is when our older kids are there for our younger kids.
Yes.
And that is my vision of having that community ownership and sense of belonging in the work that we're doing come to life. And every time I have a tough day, I go back to stories and instances of how the older kids are showing up for the younger kids, and that that impact is carrying on in such silent ways.
Yeah, because it's a cycle that's already been set in motion, right?
Yeah.
So now it's kind of like taking its next step and the wheel is turning,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So amazing. To now having done so much, even though on some days it can feel daunting,
Yeah.
what's next? What do the next, I won't even say 5 years, what do the next 6 months look like for Yenoran? Because I know Vedika always has a lot up her sleeve. There's always so much more in the pipeline. So what's next?
No, so honestly, we're at a place in our impact where we're setting up our work to be handed over to the community.
Amazing.
Right, so
amazing.
obviously preempting hiring over 90% of our community of our team from the community has been the biggest step towards that, right? But when I started also as an individual with no idea, like no funds, no support, I always knew that whatever I was building was for the community and it would be given back to the community. And that reliance on external resources, on external individuals, we would change the game, right? And we would create this model where a
Sustainable
community,
model.
a community as a collective is there for its children. The community is by its people, and that's what we're heading towards. Like how we can, hand over.
Wow, I did not see that coming, but it's only the most logical next step in Vedika and Yenoran's journey, and I can't wait to see which other communities will benefit from your next intervention, because I'm sure that's also part of the plan that once one becomes sustainable, we move to another. I know that. It's been amazing to see Yenoran kind of evolve from the caterpillar to the butterfly it is today.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for taking me along on that journey with you, and today taking our viewers along as well. So it really means a lot that you joined us today, and thank you for everything you do.
No, thank you. Thank you for, sticking through the madness. I know there are worse days than better ones at Yenodan very often, and you've firsthand experienced that, and you've still shown up for our children in so many ways. So, thank you so much for being a part of the journey and, feeling our work important enough to give it a platform. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.